Hey everybody, thank you for logging in tonight to learn some more about our history for APUSH. And we talked about Thomas Jefferson, his administration in class, his problems with the French, his Louisiana Purchase, and the things that happened from there. When Jefferson leaves office in 1808, after 8 years, once again serving his two terms, not digging it, but whatever, his replacement or his next line will be James Madison, another fellow Virginian. By the way, of our first five presidents, four of them are Virginians. And one Massachusetts, which is, John Adams. He doesn't count though. James Madison is, Secretary of State for Thomas Jefferson, starting a tradition that will say that for a few presidents that the previous Secretary of State, that foreign minister, will move into that president job after the previous president leaves after his 8 years. At least moving forward from Madison through Monroe through John Quincy Adams. A little bit about Madison. Okay, Madison's a little different than the future past presidents we've seen. Obviously he's pretty famous as part of the Constitutional Convention. He serves in Congress, serves in state legislature, serves as very prominent political figure in Virginia. But he's not a very imposing figure. Okay, Madison is short, about 5'2", 5'3", probably. The dude is probably 95 pounds soaking wet. All right, he's a very, very little dude, but he's a giant brain. He's a very, very smart man, a very great political mind, amazing writer, all that kind of stuff. The other problem he has is presence. He's a little socially awkward. This guy can't really talk to people, isn't very good at parties, which is hard because, a lot of the networking stuff is done at these big galas and that kind of stuff at this time, and which, he struggles with a little bit. Just looking here and seeing he's a pretty popular elected president. When he is elected here, he carries a massive amount of the Electoral College, 122 votes, 122 votes for about 70% of the vote, controlling most of the West here, which is, now you see Tennessee, Georgia, Ohio as part of the Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, as part of our country, and Vermont carries almost the whole country, whereas the Federalist carries only about 47 or so votes. Now, balancing out Madison in terms of his social awkwardness was his wife, Dolly, the First Lady. First Lady traditionally ran the House, and she was in the White House. She kind of becomes a social butterfly. She does all the social things that Madison struggles with, holding parties, galas, serving ice cream at the White House, first ever serve ice cream, that kind of deal, and kind of helps balance out his social shortcomings. Whereas she also will do a lot of great things. She'll save the portrait of George Washington when the British are coming to invade during War of 1812. They burn the place down. She saves that portrait so that it can be hanging in the White House later on, and it still hangs there today. Well, first things that Madison will do is help extend the embargo we're going against British and French goods by passing what's called the Non-Intercourse Acts. Now we're closing off trade to, European goods pretty much altogether. We're not getting involved at all with those European countries. And so, the goal is to punish those countries and not buy their goods, right? They really don't care. It's not hurting them. It's hurting the U.S., right? And so what kind of funny it does is that, we have these Democrat Republicans who are calling for an agrarian society and yeoman farmers and all that kind of stuff. And because we're not bringing in foreign goods, it forces U.S. factories to open up. As these factories open up, we start laying the groundwork for a U.S. industrial powerhouse, especially in the North and in New England, making cloth, making tools, those kind of things. And so these Democratic Republicans who are calling for not an industrial country are creating an industrial country. So now, after Hamilton's, shot and dead by Aaron Burr, we see his dream, his idea come to fruition as the United States becomes a more industrial type place. The other problem Madison has out in the western frontier, he's got a problem with Native Americans. So the rumor is that the British are out there yet, and there's still British agents out there instigating Native Americans and kind of having them go against the United States. And the Native American in question will be a man named Tecumseh. Make sure you know that name, who's a Shawnee who will lead a coalition of Native Americans against the U.S. Now, this isn't the first time we've had this happen. Out in Northwest Territory during the Washington administration in the 1790s, that date up there, right? You had Little Turtle, who led a coalition of Native Americans against the U.S., and Mad Anthony and Wayne, they were defeated at Fallen Timbers. And after that defeat of that Indian coalition in Fallen Timbers, some of the Native American chiefs sat down with the Americans and signed what's called the Treaty of Greenville. And this was a treaty with the Native American tribes, at least some of the tribes. Notice that word "some" be very, very important here. That would do this. It would give $20,000 hunting rights to Native Americans and $9,500 a year in goods in exchange for Americans being able to settle in Ohio. And Ohio settles up quick. I mean, it's a state by 1803. So in 7 years, it's got at least 60,000 people in it. Here's the problem. The United States saw this, treaty delegation as representing all Native Americans, whereas Native Americans only saw it as representing certain members of the tribe, certain tribes. So certain tribes sign this treaty, certain tribes don't sign this treaty. See where I'm going here? Yeah, you can see it, right? And so the tribes that don't sign it are like, well, people can't settle here, and the whites move in anyway from out east to the west, to the western frontier of Ohio and Indiana, and start moving at a breakneck pace. It's going to cause some conflict. And so these disagreements with Britain and the U.S. are kind of in the Atlantic, in the high seas. They're kind of going to the western shore now. Britain's very close up there in Canada, right? And so they're kind of talking to Native Americans and maybe in some way telling them, hey, we fight against these Americans, that kind of stuff, and trying to fight against the United States that way. And so the whole thing becomes a huge conflict over land, is what it ends up being. I mean, a lot of Native Americans are losing their land as settlers are pouring in left and right. They had that promise in 1763. They lost that promise. They had a Treaty of Greenville. I mean, the United States gained that land, right? But some of those Native American leaders said, we don't agree to this. And they get very, very frustrated. And as people are pouring in, taking over their land, they're hunting land, all that kind of stuff. The British, it's believed, saw as an opportunity. They said, what we're going to do? If we supply these Native Americans with arms, maybe they'll attack the Americans. We can, sneak back in and take over the area. So Tecumseh, here's a Shawnee chief, brilliant speaker, brilliant man, strategist, that kind of stuff. He started getting different tribes together, including tribes from Wisconsin, and said, hey, look, these Americans and the settlers are a danger to our land, a danger to our lifestyle. We need to stop them. We need to stop them now. And he wanted to get all his tribes together to make one unified force and fight against the Americans. And he had his brother on his side, whose name was the Prophet, who was kind of a mystic who did visions and religious ceremonies and stuff to really help back up what Tecumseh was saying and bring these Native American tribes together. Now, Tecumseh's main opposition was the government of the Indiana Territory, a man by the name of William Henry Harrison. Who was really worried about this, as the frontier is Indiana, and he was attacking Indiana. He's like, and Harrison's kind of like, it's weird that also these Native Americans have also equipment and guns and that kind of stuff. I wonder, maybe they're being backed up by the British, which would kind of have a reason to attack Britain, all that kind of stuff. These guys actually meet face to face, and Harrison's like, listen, you guys signed a treaty. Tecumseh's like, I didn't sign a treaty, so don't worry about it. You have no rights to the land. And they basically leave this meeting with nothing happening, no positive conversation, except for a warning saying, listen, Tecumseh, don't resist the American power, deal with it, which, in Tecumseh's mind, he's protecting his land and his family and his rights. Well, Tecumseh leaves for a while. He goes down south to talk to the Creeks and the 5 civilized tribes, try to recruit them for his too. And while Tecumseh's gone, William Henry Harrison and his forces attack the Native Americans. They burn some of the villages, kill people, that kind of stuff. And by 1811, we have the big battle here, which is called the Battle of Tippecanoe, a little village called Tippecanoe. The Native Americans launch an attack on Harrison's camp. Harrison attacks back. They go back and forth all day long. And eventually, the Native Americans retreat. The village is destroyed. And, essentially Tecumseh's dream gets destroyed here. And if Tecumseh gets captured, he knows that bad things might happen to him. He has to flee to Canada, where the British are, and is not heard from for quite a while, actually. And so that's where it ends up. Rumor is, though, is that Tecumseh will curse the Americans before he leaves. So that every president who is elected in year 0, the end, will die in office. And what's funny is that the next president elected in year 0 is William Henry Harrison, who contracts pneumonia first year of being president and dies. After that, it's Abe Lincoln, elected in 1860, dies. We have James Garfield, elected, assassinated, dies. William McKinley, elected, assassinated, dies. presidents in the 20th century. I'm the one name is slipping me right now, actually. But we have a president of the 20s who's elected and dies very early on. You have John F. Kennedy, elected in 1960, dies. And the whole it's believed to be that the treaty is the curse is broken in 1980 with the election of Reagan, where he is shot in an assassination attempt, but he actually lives and breaks the curse that happens from there. This battle Tippy Canoe really makes William Henry Harrison a very popular figure in America. He actually ends up running for president in 1840 on this big Tippy Canoe type thing. I'm a cider drinking, log cabin living kind of guy. He actually wasn't. He was a rich guy from out east, but he kind of played up this big old frontiersman, Indian fighter type thing for his own political gain. Now, while it's all happening out west, you have the impressment and stuff happening in the high seas. Some people in Kentucky, in Congress, want to see a war take place. They want to protect the U.S. industries, protect their interests, especially interests out west, where you could maybe make more money if you were trading somewhere else. If these embargoes were in case. That's what Henry Clay from Kentucky and John C. Calhoun were trying to do. These guys were young at the time, congressmen representing their states, trying to make headway, and they'll be in Congress for a long, 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 long time. And yes, Calhoun will rock that hairstyle the whole time too, believe it or not. Yes, that's a good look right there. And these guys are calling for war. They're asking for war in Congress. They talk to Madison, eventually convince Madison, because of what's happening economically to the country, because of the stoppage of trade, that kind of stuff, that, you know what, we, in the impressment of seas and the Native Americans on the western area, you know what, we got to declare war. So little United States, who just, 25 years, 20, 30 years prior was trying to become a free country, declares war on Great Britain. It's a very, very tight vote. We're talking only, less than 10 votes in the House and the Senate to actually declare war on Britain. And you can see election here in Madison is still pretty popular and still crushes his Federalist opponent. And overall, it's pretty popular. And this war, when it's done, is called Mr. Madison's War. He is commander in chief, trying to organize this war as actual president. I mean, obviously, the last war we fought was Revolution, where we didn't really have a quote unquote president kind of situation yet. It was with Washington, but he's got to try and figure out how to run this war and uses his information and uses advisors to actually run the war and win the war. And Americans have a lot of problems. I mean, they're unprepared. They have a small navy. Only 12 ships created Britain's 800, so they're a little outgunned there. Americans don't really like fighting. They still have that nervousness about the central government. So they want to have little state militias, which are all kind of disorganized and all over the place, versus a central army. And so there's no drafts happening to pay for this problem, too. I mean, money at this point is still calculated in gold. So you have to have money in gold coin. Whereas a lot of banks use paper money, saying if you turn this paper money and you get gold out of it. And that paper money is very, very dangerous, as they print a lot of that paper money, sometimes more than they had in gold. And, that money is kind of sketchy. You have no money coming from tariffs, that kind of stuff. You have regions agreements between North and the South as to what we should be doing. And so America really is not ready to fight a war, and it's going to show. So real quick overview of the war. We start in 1812. Here we see the United States, okay? And it's all of its, 15 states we got. We go on the offensive right away, which probably is not a very good idea, to be honest, with 1812. The United States attacks from Detroit and Fort Niagara, and then up in Montreal as well. We attack the big Canadian cities. Maybe trying to take Canada over. That's a good idea. Expand, take Canada over, and have it be part of the United States, And the United States is very essentially, initially very successful because Britain can't get reinforcements over. They have guys who are living far away from home. They kind of leave a few guys there to protect everything. And they take this place over, burn down the Capitol building in Canada, and say, yeah, we won. There we go. Until they don't. And as this happens, actually, the Napoleonic Wars, the wars that Napoleon's fight with all of Europe, start winding down. And so when that war winds down in Europe, Britain takes its soldiers, throws them on boats, and says, let's go fight a war in the New World. And so now as more soldiers start rolling in, we start losing these battles. Just one big one is here on Lake Erie. Oliver Hazard Perry is a commodore who builds a fleet of small ships to attack a British fleet of small ships. And they actually fight on the Great Lakes. And Perry comes out, advantageous, and comes out as a winner as part of this. Now, British also invade into West Baltimore, Maryland area, and that's where you have the famous song at Fort McHenry. It's now Star Spangled Banner, where they bomb Fort McHenry. Here's Fort McHenry with the kind of geometrical base design down here. You can actually go visit if you want to today and go tour and that kind of stuff. he writes, he's on a prison ship where he writes this whole poem about the lights and the rocket's red glare, those kind of things. He writes this big poem and comes back home, puts it to an English drinking song, and ta-da, we have our national anthem. It's kind of crazy how it happens. War of 1812, honestly, is a huge blunder for the United States. All our soldiers up in Canada, so our capital is totally undefended. And when the British invade into Baltimore, they march right in Washington, D.C. They burn the place to ground. They burn the Capitol. They burn the White House down. In fact, if you dig down the White House foundation, you'll still find scorch mark stuff when the building burnt down in 1812. It was kind of there, it was basically a loss that way. And the U.S. kind of keeps things there and keeps them, honest and everything. But what's nice is that eventually we're going to have a case where a peace treaty will be signed instead. So the United States can't defend Virginia, can't defend Washington, D.C. because all our soldiers up in Canada, we end up getting, kind of beat early on in this war. Now, as the war is going on and things aren't going very well, New England kind of gets upset about this because, their trade shut down, they can't make money, and they say, you know what, we might be done. And a bunch of Federalists get together up in New England, and they kind of talk about seceding from the Union. They say, you know what, our interests aren't being taken care of by the country. Maybe we should break away. Now, this is seen as very treasonous at this time, right? They're saying, let's break away from the Union. And these Federalists suggest this up north. In fact, they get shot down. This never actually happens. But the idea now has now been planted that, if you're not happy with your country, you can secede and get away, which we'll see happen later on in the Civil War. And I'll be discuss about this with South Carolina later on too. But here's where it starts, right? The first country to say we might break away is going to be the Northern, it's going to be the Federalists. And in a way, it's kind of the end of the Federalist Party. A lot of those guys never elected to office again because of this whole situation. And that Federalist Party after 1818 pretty much just goes away. Now, the peace treaty is signed on December 24th, 1814 for the War of 1812. Honestly, all they say is we're going to outlaw impressment, have free trade in the seas. All of our borders go back to the way they were. Honestly, nothing really changes pre-war to post-war. It's kind of a useless little conflict. The only problem is that communication is so slow that in early 1815, we saw the Battle of New Orleans take place. You have Andrew Jackson on the horse here. He leads a ragtag force of Cajuns and slaves and Native Americans and African Americans, all kinds of stuff against the British forces. And they're able to stop the British forces. They have to march through mud and muck, all that kind of stuff, and mow them down here as they try to cross this canal and get into New Orleans. And it seems a huge victory and real popular for the Army and the Battle of New Orleans and he who won it. And Andrew Jackson is all kind of praised for it. He's named Old Hickory because he can't break him, just like an old hickory stick, that kind of deal. And becomes kind of a national celebrity that way. And to the fact where he ends up doing more and more military campaigns down into Florida, which is now a U.S. territory, attacking the Seminole or Native American tribes and stopping them from doing what they do in Florida. So real quick here, remember we have a lot of independence and respect out of this war. The war didn't really do much, okay? I mean, we didn't gain anything, add anything, but we got to get some international respect, some international love, saying, hey, you know what? You guys stood up to Britain, stood toe-to-toe with them, and didn't lose just too badly. Federalist Party, gone. Does not exist anymore. All we have now are Democratic Republicans. We have industry starting to grow. And those poor Native Americans west of the conquered all the way down the Mississippi, and they're kind of in not so good situation. We also have national heroes emerging now. Andrew Jackson, a well-known name who is going to come into play later on in this unit. And we start seeing things kind of get a little sectional in that, the North and the South and the West are kind of disagreeing on what we got to do, especially with that Northern group during that Hartford Convention wanting to break away and make their own country. Also, Canadian nationalism comes into play a little bit here too, because Canada has to fight their own wars and stand up and stuff. So we see Canada kind of a more national identity here. And that's probably last we'll talk about them all year. And lastly, what about slavery? Well, slavery still exists. We went past the 1808 date where we're going to outlaw slave trade. So all outside slave trade is stopped. There's no more new slaves coming in, but slave trade is still very prevalent within the United States. Guys, thanks for listening. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for doing your reading as well. I will see you guys in class. Until then, I wish you all the best. And please keep studying, ladies and gentlemen. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate it.